At the edge of the Amazon, where the river folds into dark silence and the last shimmer of blue dusk lingers on the water, the jaguar emerges like a living paradox, solitary and silent, yet sovereign over the life systems of an entire floodplain. The air is heavy with humidity, but soundless. Only the shuffle of reeds betrays movement. Then, without warning, the stillness ruptures. A bronze-spotted body slashes from shadow into water, the eruption so sudden that the river itself seems startled into motion. This is not the theatrical leap of a predator that wastes energy on showmanship. It is a calculated strike, the final instant in an equation that has been unfolding invisibly for hours. Unlike many big cats that rely on protracted chases or cooperative tactics, the jaguar is a master of the single, decisive ambush. Its body is built not for pursuit but for detonation. Compact muscles coil beneath its shoulders, transferring explosive power into a short sprint or a precise pounce. Its skull, shorter and rounder than those of its feline relatives, is the biological keystone of this strategy. That shape, coupled with thick zygomatic arches and an unusually large temporalis muscle, produces the highest bite force relative to body size among the great cats. The physics are startling. When the jaguar drives its canines into a caiman's skull or a river turtle's carapace, it generates enough pressure to crack bone or pierce armor. This adaptation has refined its menu, pushing it beyond antelopes and deer into prey that few predators dare to target, animals protected by shells, scales, or sheer mass. The mathematics of this ambush life are unforgiving. Success rates are low. A jaguar may stalk silently for hours and strike only to fail within seconds. Yet the energy balance favors patience. When a kill is secured, whether a capybara dragged from a sandbar or a caiman wrestled from the shallows, the caloric windfall justifies the long stretches of waiting and watching. The jaguar does not need frequency, it needs impact. Its presence alone alters the choices of other animals. Capybaras graze closer to the cover of water, but never too far from escape routes, knowing the riverbank itself conceals death. Caiman patrol less boldly when jaguars are active, nesting females more cautious about where they leave their eggs. This ripple effect extends beyond predator-prey drama and into the fabric of the ecosystem. By thinning caiman numbers and suppressing overgrazing herbivores, jaguars indirectly protect shoreline vegetation, which in turn stabilizes riverbanks against erosion. Plants allowed to thrive provide shade that cools the shallow water, moderating microclimates for amphibians and fish nurseries. Nesting birds find higher survival rates in areas where herbivores are not stripping away cover. Each kill, though violent in its moment, safeguards a quiet equilibrium that unfolds across seasons. The jaguar is not merely a hunter, it is a regulator, a pressure valve for the system's excesses. The riverbank itself seems designed for jaguar tactics. Dense mats of heliconia and tangled tree roots create corridors of invisibility, giving the cat the illusion of absence even when it is only meters away. Its rosetted coat is not merely aesthetic camouflage, it breaks the body's outline into a scattering of shadows that blend with leaf and light. Even in open spaces, the jaguar becomes a suggestion rather than a certainty. To a capybara pausing mid-graze, the difference between safety and death may come down to whether its eyes decode that pattern as vegetation or predator. There is irony in the jaguar's mastery of ambush. Unlike wolves, which sculpt ecosystems by relentless presence, or eagles, which govern through visible dominance, the jaguar's influence comes from absence, its ability to remain unseen, to haunt the imagination of its prey. This psychological presence is as potent as its physical one. Capybaras limit their foraging range not only because jaguars kill them, but because jaguars might kill them. The same fear ripples through caiman populations, shaping their basking choices and nesting sites. Ecology here is not just interaction, it is anticipation, the shadow of predation woven into every behavioral choice. Yet for all its dominance, the jaguar lives under constraints as sharp as its own teeth. Its reliance on large prey makes it vulnerable to fluctuations in those populations. Deforestation strips away the dense corridors it requires for hunting. Poachers target both jaguars and their food base, unraveling the balance from multiple directions. Each absence of cover, each carcass taken by humans, diminishes the sovereign's power. In some river stretches, the silence of dusk remains unbroken, not because the jaguar has failed its ambush, but because it is no longer there to attempt it. The system feels the loss almost immediately. Caiman nest densities rise, leading to overpredation on fish stocks. Capybara herds expand, gnawing away shoreline vegetation until erosion bleeds soil into the river, clouding spawning beds. The absence of one predator echoes through an entire ecosystem like a collapsed pillar in a vast structure. For the individual jaguar, survival is a study in energy economics. Thermoregulation plays a subtle but vital role in its hunting rhythm. By day, the heat of the Amazon canopy would drain stamina, forcing the cat into lethargic retreat beneath roots or in shaded hollows. Blue hour, that brief window between heat and night, offers the optimal balance: cool air, dim light, and prey still active at the water's edge. The jaguar's emergence at this hour is not merely convenience but necessity, a physiological synchronization with the environment. Each sensory adaptation, from its low-light vision to the silent pads on its paws, is a product of this synchronization, tuned to the thresholds of dusk and river. The Amazon is not short on predators, but none exerts influence in quite this way. The jaguar is both sculptor and sentinel of its domain. Its sovereignty is not maintained through constant display, but through rare, decisive interventions that ripple far beyond the individual encounter. To witness a jaguar breach from shadow to water is to see more than a hunt. It is to glimpse the underlying architecture of the floodplain, the invisible scaffolding that keeps prey populations, vegetation, and even soil in balance. It is to understand that power in the jungle is not measured only in strength or frequency, but in the quiet weight of presence. And so, as the last traces of twilight yield to night and the river swallows its reflections, the jaguar retreats once more into the weave of shadow and leaf. The water stills, the silence returns, but the sovereign's influence remains. It lingers in the cautious grazing of capybaras, in the guarded vigilance of caimans, in the resilience of riverbank vegetation that clings to its soil. The jaguar does not need to be seen to govern. It is enough that the river remembers. The Oxbow Lake lies in eerie suspension, a mirror of sky and canopy so perfect that it resists belief. Not a ripple disturbs its glassy surface. The green pads of macrophytes float like fragments of a painting. Yet beneath this illusion of calm, there is a presence, a coil of muscle longer than a canoe, thicker than a man's thigh, pressed into the mud where light dissolves into green shadow. The anaconda is not simply concealed here, it is absorbed, an extension of the lake itself, a phantom that waits for time to deliver opportunity. Patience is the anaconda's weapon. Unlike the jaguar that detonates from cover or the caiman that surges in open water, the snake is a strategist of stillness. Its sensors, housed in pits along the lips, register faint traces of infrared radiation, an almost supernatural ability to perceive warmth against the uniform cool of water. Even vibrations, transmitted through the suspended matrix of roots and stems, are translated into a map of movement. A capybara grazing too close to the shoreline may never hear its own fate. The snake has already detected the subtle tremors of muscle shifting against mud, a signal too quiet for ears but not too subtle for coils. The ambush unfolds with unsettling economy. The anaconda does not lunge, nor does it chase. Instead, it drifts upward in silence, the water parting around its head in languid sheets. To the prey, it is only a change in current, a ripple easily mistaken for the breeze. Then, in a single eruption, the body loops forward and the strike is complete. Its teeth, recurved like fishhooks, are not designed to cut but to hold, anchoring prey in place long enough for the coils to lock. This is not strangulation in the crude sense. Constriction collapses circulation within seconds, halting the heart before suffocation ever takes effect. As the animal thrashes, the snake tightens, its muscles listening for the heartbeat. Each pulse that weakens is registered through subtle vibrations along the coils, an intimate feedback system that informs the predator when life has left its victim. Such meals come rarely but decisively. A single capybara may sustain a large female for weeks, even months, depending on the water temperature that governs digestion. After swallowing prey whole, a grotesque yet astonishing feat of elastic ligaments and expandable ribs, the anaconda retreats to cover, immobile in both defense and necessity. Fasting is not merely a choice, it is strategy. The metabolic efficiency of snakes is legendary, and the anaconda refines it further. By lowering metabolic rate after massive meals, the snake minimizes risk, conserving energy while prey abundance cycles through flood and drought. In a system of feast and famine, the ability to endure silence is as critical as the ability to strike. But patience takes other forms. When floodwaters recede, the still lakes collapse into shrinking pools, and the anaconda reveals another side of its biology, its reproductive strategy. Males, drawn to pheromones released by receptive females, converge in writhing masses known as breeding balls. Here, in a rare moment of visibility, the phantom abandons secrecy for competition. Several males entwine a single female, sometimes for weeks, each struggling for position as they coil and constrict in what appears to be combat, but is instead persistence. Unlike most reptiles, the anaconda gives live birth. Dozens of young emerge into the flooded grasslands, each already equipped to hunt frogs or fish. Few will survive the first year, but those that do inherit the same patience, the same stealth, the same phantom role. The ecological weight of this predator is immense, though hidden. By preying on capybara, the snake reduces grazing pressure along the fragile river margins. Capybaras, unchecked, would strip banks to stubble, leaving nests of herons and terns exposed, collapsing soil into the waterways and accelerating erosion. Turtles too feel the pressure. Though armored, their vulnerability is revealed in the anaconda's bite force and persistence. Young turtles fall in numbers, regulating population surges that might otherwise choke macrophyte beds. Even caiman, themselves formidable predators, are not beyond reach. Young caiman often disappear into the coils, while larger adults remain warier, their own hunting strategies shaped by the ever-present risk of ambush. The phantom thus engineers distribution, shifting prey away from the most dangerous margins, subtly redrawing patterns of behavior across entire waterscapes. To watch an anaconda is to see camouflage perfected not only in skin but in rhythm. Its olive scales, mottled with black ovals, mimic shadow and sunlight filtering through weeds. But more than color, it is timing that conceals it. Remaining motionless for days, even weeks, the snake merges with the stillness of the lake. Its metabolism tolerates the long wait, and its hunting success depends on that patience. Prey conditioned by constant vigilance eventually falter, lulled by an absence of disturbance. The snake does not need to move to dominate. It needs only to wait. Its role in thermoregulation reveals another layer of adaptation. Being ectothermic, the anaconda's activity is bound to the sun's rhythms and the water's temperature. A body this massive heats slowly, retains warmth long after the surface has cooled, and thus operates on a different temporal scale from its prey. In cooler waters, digestion may pause almost entirely, the snake essentially shutting down until warmth returns. This ability to pause life without consequence grants it resilience in an ecosystem of extremes, floods that drown entire forests, droughts that reduce rivers to mud tracks. Where mammals starve or drown, the snake waits, patient as always. There is a paradox here worth considering. The anaconda exerts enormous influence on its ecosystem, yet it does so through invisibility. Unlike the jaguar, whose kills reverberate visibly across prey populations, or the giant otter, whose noisy patrols announce control, the anaconda governs by absence. Its predation is unpredictable, its presence undetectable until it is too late. This uncertainty conditions prey behavior just as strongly as actual encounters. Capybaras linger less at open banks, turtles shift nesting to less accessible sites, and caiman patrols disperse. Fear of the phantom is a form of control as potent as its coils. The myths of the Amazon, whispered through generations of human communities, amplify this hidden presence. Stories of giant serpents swallowing boats or pulling men beneath the water are exaggerations, but they reveal a truth. The anaconda embodies the jungle's uncertainty, the sense that beneath every calm surface lies a danger unseen. Even modern science has not fully pierced this veil. Reliable population estimates remain elusive. Their cryptic behavior and the flooded complexity of their habitat defy easy measurement. In this way, the anaconda retains its mythic aura, both studied and unknowable, both predator and phantom. As night falls, the oxbow reflects the moon in fractured ripples. Somewhere beneath, coils shift imperceptibly, a body aligning with the rhythms of unseen prey. The water remains glass-still to any casual glance, yet life within it trembles under the pressure of presence. The anaconda does not roar, it does not leap, it does not chase. Its sovereignty is measured in patience, in the silence of waiting, in the brief violence of constriction followed by long intervals of absence. The phantom does not need to be visible to command the floodplain. It is enough that the system remembers, that prey scatter from the margins, that vegetation thrives in the wake of avoidance. The snake remains in shadow, and because it remains, the ecosystem holds its shape. In the Amazon, power is rarely loud. It is most often hidden, coiled in the mud beneath a glass-still lake, waiting for the next heartbeat to stumble. The first light of day breaks over the floodplain, spilling pale gold across the surface of still lagoons. Mist clings to the water like breath reluctant to rise, and on the mudbanks, dark shapes emerge from shadow. Motionless, jaws agape, the caimans receive the sun as if in ritual. The spectacle is both ordinary and essential. a nation of reptilian bodies aligning themselves with the physics of heat. For the caiman, warmth is not luxury, it is survival. As ectotherms, their biology is governed not by internal furnaces, but by the energy of the environment. When dawn arrives, they must harvest it carefully. Gaping mouths release excess heat from blood vessels threaded beneath the skin of the throat, allowing them to balance the delicate equation between warming too fast and overheating. By noon, many will slip back into the water to cool, their bodies moving in synchrony with thermal gradients, as if instruments in a natural orchestra. These cycles of sun and shadow determine everything: digestion, hunting precision, even the readiness to breed. Where mammals burn calories to keep constant temperature, the caiman endures by surrendering to fluctuation, tuning life to the pulse of the landscape. Yet basking is only the most visible part of their strategy. When the sun wanes, the caiman shifts from passivity to predation. In backwaters where currents slow and the moon paints silver across floating debris, their hunting begins. Eyeshine glimmers above the surface, pairs of orange orbs reflecting lantern-like across the swamp. They are ambush predators, favoring patience over pursuit. Fish, mammals, and even birds that venture too close meet jaws lined with conical teeth, not for cutting, but for gripping. Once seized, the prey is subdued through the sudden violence of a death roll, a spinning maneuver that disorients and tears. The physics are brutal but efficient, perfected by millions of years of crocodilian design. This nightly pressure sculpts the floodplain in subtle ways. Fish, for example, alter their activity windows, venturing more boldly during daylight when caiman are lethargic, retreating at night when the threat grows. Small mammals crossing backwaters shift their movements, choosing narrower channels or safer timing to reduce risk. The caiman does not need to catch everything it stalks. Its mere presence reshuffles the routines of dozens of species, spreading prey across space and time in ways that prevent overexploitation of any single resource. The architecture of the ecosystem is in part written by their silent patrols. The story extends to reproduction, where caiman reveal a rarely acknowledged tenderness. Females construct mound nests of vegetation and mud, layering plant material that ferments into heat, incubating eggs without the aid of their ectothermic bodies. Guarding is relentless, and any creature, be it raccoon, tegu lizard or human, risks injury if it approaches too near. When the hatchlings begin to call from within their shells, mothers respond with careful excavation, carrying the fragile young in their jaws to water. Even after release, the bond endures. Females linger nearby, herding offspring and issuing warning growls to intruders. For a species often caricatured as cold-blooded killers, this guardianship is striking, a reminder that survival is not only about predation, but also about continuity. Predator-prey dynamics, however, are never unilateral. Jaguars and giant otters act as counterweights in this system, preventing caimans from monopolizing the aquatic domain. Jaguars, with their skull-crushing bite, are among the few land predators capable of breaching caiman armor. Their ambushes at river margins force caimans to exercise caution, retreating to deeper waters during high-risk hours. Giant otters, though lighter, wield power in numbers. Bands of otters harass caiman, mobbing them with coordinated strikes that drive them away from favored fishing territories. These checks balance the gatekeeper's role, ensuring that no single predator dominates the aquatic stage unchecked. Yet caimans influence the ecosystem not only through behavior, but also through engineering. During the dry season, when water contracts into isolated pools and channels, they dig burrows and carve trails into mud. These refuges serve as life support systems, holding residual moisture and allowing fish, amphibians and invertebrates to persist where otherwise they would perish. Trails pressed into the drying soil act as conduits for rainwater when the floods return, accelerating the rehydration of the floodplain. In this way, the caiman becomes an inadvertent architect, shaping microhabitats that ripple benefits to a suite of species far beyond its own kind. This dual role, predator and engineer, casts the caiman as a true gatekeeper of the floodplain. Its hunting dictates when and where other creatures move, while its nesting and burrowing behaviors modulate how the land itself breathes through cycles of drought and deluge. Remove caiman from the system, and prey behaviors relax. Fish congregate recklessly, mammals cross waterways in abundance, and grazing pressures spike. Without the burrows, dry season mortality for aquatic life escalates, and recolonization slows when the floods return. The ecosystem would still function, but it would stumble, missing a stabilizing hand. The physiology behind this influence is equally compelling. Caiman blood chemistry allows tolerance of extended dives, with slowed heart rates and the ability to partition oxygen to critical organs. This makes them as comfortable beneath the surface as on land, a versatility that ensures their presence across diverse habitats, from open rivers to shaded creeks. Their sensory organs, too, are tuned to a dual world, eyes and nostrils positioned atop the skull to survey above water, while the rest of the body remains concealed below. A specialized pressure-sensitive system in their jaws, akin to ripples on a drum, detects the faintest disturbance in water, a frog surfacing, a fish brushing past reeds. These traits are not mere curiosities. They are the toolkit that allows the caiman to operate as an apex manipulator of space and time. Despite their abundance, caimans are not invulnerable. Their populations were once decimated by the skin trade, and though numbers have rebounded, they remain susceptible to habitat loss and human encroachment. Fires set to clear land erase nesting mounds, and overfishing depletes their prey base. Each disruption chips away at their ability to hold the gate, to mediate flows of life across the floodplain. In some regions, reduced caiman density has led to explosive growth of certain fish populations, altering community dynamics and undermining the delicate balance of aquatic vegetation. Such shifts reveal how deeply the species is wired into the system. As the day advances, the basking reptiles retreat once more into water, dispersing with the same silence that marked their arrival. The river absorbs them, leaving only faint ripples and the memory of toothy silhouettes against the morning mist. Yet their presence lingers in the altered behavior of fish that dart more cautiously, in the burrows that hold precious water through drought, in the nests where mothers guard the next generation. The caiman is more than a predator lying in wait. It is a regulator, a builder, a silent hand guiding the thresholds of survival in the Amazon floodplain. In the Amazon, sovereignty is rarely absolute. It is shared, contested, balanced through invisible negotiations among predators, prey, and landscape. The caiman's authority lies in its duality, both destroyer and protector, both hunter and provider of habitat. To call it a gatekeeper is no metaphor. Every dawn bask, every night hunt, every burrow carved into drying earth holds open the gates of survival, for itself, for its prey, and for the floodplain it inhabits. The system is not merely shaped by their presence, it is held together by it. The river is not quiet when the giant otters arrive. A churning of brown water, a rapid succession of high-pitched barks, and suddenly the lagoon feels less like a tranquil backwater and more like a territory under patrol. Sleek heads break the surface in near-perfect formation, eyes forward, ears flat, each individual positioned as if rehearsed. This is no chance gathering. It is a family raft, a unit bound not only by blood, but by constant collaboration, moving through their environment with the discipline of a coordinated patrol. Unlike the solitary sovereignty of jaguars or the patient ambush of anacondas, giant otters thrive on the collective. Every movement, every dive, every chorus of vocalizations reinforces cohesion. Their voices, numbering among the most complex repertoires of any carnivore, announce both identity and intention. A bark can signal alarm, a whistle call cohesion, a wavering squeal alert others to prey. The soundscape of a lagoon under otter control is unmistakable, and it is no coincidence that many potential rivals give these waters a wide berth. The chorus alone speaks of enforcement, of a team whose authority is reinforced by numbers. That authority begins with hunger. Giant otters burn through energy at a rate far higher than most Amazonian predators. Their dense fur, though marvelously insulating, must be maintained by constant grooming and drying to preserve its waterproof seal. Unlike reptiles, they cannot pause their metabolism through torpor or fasting. Every day demands food, and not in small amounts. Each adult consumes several kilograms of fish daily, which means a family of a dozen or more can strip a stretch of water bare in hours. This relentless requirement makes them roaming pressure points, redistributing fish populations and reshaping entire communities as they pass. Their hunting unfolds with striking efficiency. Where a solitary caiman may wait passively for opportunity, giant otters pursue. They dive in synchronized arcs, one driving a school of fish toward another, while others form a living barrier to prevent escape. The choreography is instinctual yet precise, a predator's ballet performed beneath the waterline. Fish populations respond by shifting size structure. Individuals that survive are often smaller, faster, or those that favor murkier refuges where otters' sight advantage weakens. Over generations, these pressures sculpt communities into new shapes, demonstrating how a predator's biology can ripple through evolutionary time. The influence does not stop with fish. Stingrays, often buried in sand, alter their resting patterns in waters where otters forage. These rays, normally still and patient ambushers, become restless, moving to deeper refuges to avoid discovery by the probing muzzles of the otter clan. Even caimans, rulers of the still backwater, find themselves on the defensive. A lone caiman confronted by half a dozen otters does not hold its ground. They mob with relentless agility, darting at flanks, harassing until the reptile withdraws. This is not predation but intimidation, a strategy that removes competition without incurring the risk of direct combat. Rarely even a jaguar finds itself challenged if it lingers too close to a den. The otter's collective confidence creates a buffer zone few are willing to cross. The structure of this power lies not only in hunting, but in territory. Giant otters are intensely territorial, and they mark their domain with latrines, muddy mounds where scent is deposited in communal layers. These latrines act as chemical billboards, broadcasting occupancy and dominance to any potential rivals. They are revisited and reinforced constantly, ensuring that even in absence, the message remains. The landscape itself becomes partitioned into defended corridors, each controlled by a family unit whose presence reorganizes the local web of life. Yet this control is never permanent. The metabolic demands that drive their hunting also prevent long-term stability in any one place. Once fish stocks decline, the family raft must move, opening space for competitors and prey to recolonize. This constant mobility creates a pulse across the floodplain, alternating between periods of intense predation and quiet recovery. In this way, the giant otters operate less like static apex predators and more like moving storm fronts, zones of high pressure that reshape local systems before drifting on. Even their dens reflect this duality of enforcement and dependency. Excavated along riverbanks, often beneath roots or fallen trees, these burrows serve as nurseries for pups and as defensive bastions against intrusion. Entryways are smoothed by repeated use, and the banks above are worn by grooming sessions and sunning rituals. Around these den sites, the river's microecology shifts. Fish populations are reduced, yes, but amphibians, insects, and even aquatic plants adjust to the constant disturbance of otter patrols. The very soil of the bank may erode differently, shaped by repeated entry and exit of the family. Thus, even at rest, they leave fingerprints of influence on the ecosystem. Thermoregulation, often overlooked in their story, explains much of this behavior. Giant otters lack the insulating fat layers of seals or sea lions. Their survival in tropical waters depends on a dense fur coat maintained in perfect condition. When wet, they are vulnerable to heat loss. Hence the constant grooming, the sunning on logs, the group huddles that ensure both warmth and cohesion. Their need to manage body temperature ties directly to their constant need for food, as every degree of lost warmth must be countered by metabolized calories. Physiology here becomes destiny. The enforcer role is born not out of choice, but of demand. Their familial bonds intensify this enforcement. Pups remain dependent for months, and their survival hinges on collective hunting and defense. A single adult could never sustain them. Only the coordinated efforts of the raft ensure continuity. This interdependence amplifies the species' ecological weight. Where one predator shapes its environment through solitary influence, the otter's entire social system acts as a multiplier. Every choice, to hunt, to rest, to relocate, is made not by one, but by many, and each decision radiates outward to affect countless other species. There is, however, vulnerability beneath this power. The same reliance on constant food intake that fuels their dominance also leaves them exposed to scarcity. Habitat loss, overfishing, and pollution strike them harder than many predators, collapsing not only food supply, but also the denning sites they require. Human disturbance at a single den can fragment a family unit, dissolving the cohesion that gives them strength. In areas where otters vanish, the system shifts quickly. Caimans expand into unchallenged waters, fish populations balloon unchecked, and stingrays return to shallow sandbanks. The absence of the enforcer reveals how much order their presence imposed. As dusk falls, the patrol continues, heads bobbing in unison as the river darkens to indigo. Their calls echo across the floodplain, not random chatter but a declaration. This water is held, this family endures. For prey, it is a warning, for rivals, a deterrent. But for the ecosystem, it is balance embodied. The giant otters are not simply hunters, not simply protectors of their young. They are enforcers, teams of relentless appetite and coordination, binding the river into a rhythm that acknowledges no neutrality. Where they move, the system bends. Where they vanish, the system frays. In the Amazon, few powers are as visible, as vocal, or as communal as the giant otter. Their patrols remind us that sovereignty in these waters is not always about size or stealth. Sometimes it is about persistence, teamwork, and the simple, unyielding pressure of hunger applied every day in every channel without pause. The family raft is both predator and presence, enforcing order not by decree but by necessity, and in doing so, keeping the river alive with tension, vigilance, and balance. The surface of the river at night is black glass, unbroken except for the soft clicks of insects and the faint slap of a fish against a lily pad. In this darkness, sight is useless, and silence would seem to grant prey the advantage. Yet beneath the water lies a predator whose perception is written not in light or sound, but in current. The electric eel transforms the still lagoon into a wire, every body within it an extension of a circuit it alone controls. Where other hunters stalk with eyes, ears, or ambush, the eel governs with fields, a living generator in a world that becomes, for an instant, pure electricity. The story begins quietly. From its elongated body, the eel releases a constant pulse of low-voltage signals, brief, crackling echoes invisible to most, but mapped perfectly by its own nervous system. These electric fields ripple outward, deforming as they encounter obstacles, a stone, a reed, or the faint outline of a fish suspended mid-water. Through this electrolocation, the eel sees in the dark without eyes, resolving shape and motion at close range with uncanny precision. Prey hidden among weeds cannot remain hidden. The distortions in the field reveal presence as surely as footprints on sand. This is not passive sensing but active probing, a sonar built from sparks rather than sound. When the eel commits to the hunt, the water itself changes character. High-voltage volleys, up to 600 volts, discharge in rapid succession, stunning small fish into paralysis. But this is more than brute force. Experiments in the field have revealed a subtler tactic, a kind of remote control of prey. By issuing short bursts of high voltage, the eel causes nearby fish muscles to contract involuntarily. Hidden in silt or vegetation, the fish betrays itself with a twitch, its nervous system hijacked by the eel's current. The predator does not waste time rooting through the substrate. It forces the quarry to declare itself, then delivers the immobilizing strike. The water at night becomes a stage of involuntary dances, movements dictated not by instinct or will, but by the predator's circuitry. Yet the eel is not invulnerable in its mastery. Its body, stretched long and narrow, contains vast arrays of specialized cells, electrocytes, that power these discharges. To fuel this machinery requires oxygen in quantities higher than dissolved water can provide. Thus, the eel must surface regularly, gulping air into a highly vascularized mouth that functions like a lung. Each trip breaks its invisibility, a flash of ripple that risks exposure to herons, caimans, or even jaguars at the water's edge. The rhythm of these breaths structures its life, stealthy hunting below, then sudden urgency above. Prey and rivals alike exploit these intervals, the brief windows when the phantom circuit is forced to reconnect with the open air. Still, the eel compensates with influence that extends beyond the individual strike. The corridors it patrols become corridors avoided. Fish, sensitive to the electric fields, even if not directly stunned, learn to circumvent stretches of lagoon favored by the eel. These electro-avoidance zones redistribute traffic, altering where schools feed, spawn, or migrate. In ecological terms, the eel is less a predator than a moving power line, reshaping flows of life through fear of unseen shocks. Unlike a jaguar whose presence is localized to a bank, the eel radiates its influence outward in every direction. The water remembers and prey adapts. The biology underlying this dominance is a marvel of evolutionary engineering. 3 separate electric organs run the length of its body, each with distinct roles. The Sachs organ for low-voltage electrolocation, the Hunter's organ for intermediate discharges, and the main organ for the high-voltage blasts that define its reputation. Within each, stacks of electrocytes function like rows of batteries, their synchronized firing producing cumulative currents powerful enough to stun not only prey, but in recorded cases, horses and humans who strayed into the wrong waters. That such a system evolved in parallel with more conventional predatory adaptations reminds us of the Amazon's evolutionary abundance. Here, even the laws of physics become weapons. The ecological consequences of this adaptation are subtle but profound. In regions of high eel density, prey populations skew smaller, their body sizes constrained by constant pressure. Large fish, which might resist a strike or recover more quickly, become rare, driven into deeper or swifter waters where eels cannot operate as effectively. Stingrays too adjust their behavior, shifting to zones of higher turbidity where the eel's electrolocation loses resolution. Thus the predator engineers not only who survives but where species choose to live. The spatial mosaic of the floodplain, who occupies clear lagoon, muddy creek or swift channel, owes much to the invisible architecture of electric predation. Surprisingly, the eel's discharges also attract scavengers. A stunned fish is rarely consumed entirely by the eel itself. In the chaos of night, piranhas, catfish and turtles often converge to share in the spoils. Thus, the eel becomes a catalyst of opportunity, its violence feeding not only itself but an entourage of opportunists. It is a reminder that predation is rarely isolated. It cascades outward, producing beneficiaries and competitors in ways not immediately apparent. But the eel, despite its formidable arsenal, is not limitless. Each high-voltage volley drains resources, and excessive discharges without prey capture can leave it weakened. Fasting periods follow failed hunts, during which the eel reduces activity, conserving energy until the next opportunity arises. In drought seasons, when waters shrink and prey density increases, the eel thrives, dominating pools with overwhelming control. In floods, however, when prey disperses across vast inundated forests, its efficiency declines. Thus, the flood pulse, the seasonal heartbeat of the Amazon, dictates the circuit breaker's strength, amplifying or diminishing its sovereignty in rhythm with the river. The myths surrounding the eel speak to its impact on human culture. Indigenous stories describe it as a living thunderbolt, a creature born of storms that carries lightning into the water. Even modern researchers approach with caution, knowing that a startled eel can deliver repeated shocks, enough to incapacitate an unwary handler. The fear is not misplaced, yet it mirrors the fear felt by fish that share its habitat. For them, the eel is not folklore, but a daily presence, an unseen current shaping choices with each flicker of muscle. In the broader system, the electric eel represents a rare form of predator, one that rules not by speed, stealth, or brute strength, but by mastery of physics itself. It enforces boundaries in darkness, compels behavior through invisible commands, and reconfigures aquatic communities through corridors of avoidance. To imagine the river without it is to imagine a silence not only of shocks, but of the entire pattern of fish movements that its fields dictate. As the night deepens, the eel rises once more for air, its head breaking the surface in a quick gulp before sinking back into the blackness. Below, the water hums again with invisible fields, probing, commanding, paralyzing. The lagoon, though outwardly still, is alive with nervous tension, every organism aware of the phantom circuitry in its midst. The electric eel does not dominate through constant kills. It dominates through the promise of interruption, the knowledge that at any moment the current can surge and the river itself will break into wire. In this unseen empire of voltage and vigilance, the circuit breaker reigns, not loudly, not visibly, but undeniably. The river narrows and shallows in the dry season, its breadth retreating from a mile-wide expanse to a braided network of shrinking channels. Where once there was a liquid forest, now only scattered lagoons and muddy creeks remain, each more crowded than the last. The water is warmer, murkier, oxygen thinner. Fish that once dispersed across flooded woodlands are compressed into these pockets like grain poured into a sack. It is here, in the tightening choke of the dry down, that the true character of the piranha reveals itself, not as the mindless frenzy of folklore, but as a predator whose strategy is born of circumstance, ecology, and anatomy. They are schooling fish, yes, but their cohesion is not mere panic or chaos. A piranha school is a shifting geometry of hunger and restraint, a collective that both conceals individuals from larger predators and amplifies their predatory reach. The myth of constant frenzy, sharpened by tales of stripped cattle and unlucky swimmers, obscures their reality. Most of the time they move as wary opportunists, feeding on insects, small fish, or scavenged remains. Only under stress, crowded waters, limited prey, or the sudden influx of blood into the current, does the equilibrium snap into violence. When it does, the transition is instantaneous, the silence of a school giving way to a synchronized surge. The mechanics of that surge lie in their dentition. Piranha teeth interlock in perfect occlusion, forming a jagged shear not unlike the blades of tin snips. Each bite excises a clean plug of flesh, muscle, or fin, leaving a wound as precise as it is devastating. Unlike the crushing jaws of caiman or the piercing canines of jaguar, the piranha's mouth is built for subtraction. Each strike reduces the whole, shaving biomass into manageable fragments. In this way, they are both predators and recyclers, accelerating decomposition with every bite. A wounded fish does not linger long. A fallen carcass is consumed in hours rather than days. By converting the bulky into the particulate, piranhas make nutrients more rapidly available to scavengers, insects, and microbes downstream. This cleaning function is often overlooked in their villainized reputation, but it is no less crucial. Injured capybaras crossing channels may lose ragged chunks of skin, yet infection is reduced by the removal of necrotic tissue. Carrion left too long on a riverbank is quickly reduced to bone, preventing the spread of pathogens. Even turtles, armored as they are, feel the bite of piranhas on their exposed limbs, a pressure that influences when and where they dare to cross. Herbivores adjust their behaviors in subtle ways, timing their swims to cooler mornings when piranha metabolism is slower, or shifting crossings to deeper, faster channels where the fish hesitate to congregate. In this way, the piranha's role is not limited to consumption, but extends into governance, influencing the rhythms of movement for animals far larger than themselves. The escalation of risk during the dry season is not solely a product of hunger, but of physics. As water volume decreases, dissolved oxygen plummets. Fish under hypoxic stress are sluggish, desperate, and easily detected. Piranhas, like many Amazonian fishes, supplement oxygen by surface breathing, their gill physiology adapted to endure the scarcity. But while others weaken, piranhas remain capable hunters. their sharp senses and endurance giving them a competitive edge in the crowding pools. Here, the probability of encounter rises. Schools of piranhas bump against turtles, caimans, even wading birds, their opportunism triggered not by madness, but by opportunity multiplied beyond measure. Yet to cast them only as threats ignores their vulnerability. They themselves are prey for dolphins, caimans, and large catfish, not to mention jaguars that swipe them from shallow pools with surprising ease. Schooling, then, is as much defense as offense. A predator may snatch one, but it cannot easily pursue 100 scattering in every direction. The same cohesion that makes them formidable hunters also shields them in part from annihilation. This is the paradox of the piranha school. Unity is both sword and shield, both threat and refuge. The sensory world of a piranha reveals even more nuance. Their lateral line system, sensitive to the faintest vibrations, allows them to detect the struggling flutters of a wounded fish tens of meters away. Their vision, sharp in the dim brown waters, discerns contrast with remarkable acuity. A single drop of blood or the flash of exposed muscle can tip a school into action. They are not mindless, but exquisitely tuned, their behavior emergent from a network of stimuli that the Amazon constantly provides. In ecological terms, their role as regulators becomes clear when one examines the patterns they enforce. By harassing herbivores at crossings, they limit grazing pressure in certain floodplain meadows, allowing aquatic vegetation to rebound in patches rather than being stripped uniformly. By consuming weak or wounded individuals, they reduce the spread of disease, functioning as aquatic sanitizers, much like vultures do in the sky. By redistributing where and when animals cross, they help spread grazing and seed dispersal unevenly, producing a patchwork landscape that sustains greater diversity. Far from chaos, their bites are threads in a fabric of regulation. The relationship between piranhas and humans underscores the tension between myth and function. Tales of travelers reduced to skeletons in minutes exaggerate the truth, but grow from kernels of reality observed in the height of dry season stress. Indigenous peoples, long familiar with the rhythms of these fish, respect their danger while also harvesting them as food. In some regions they are smoked, grilled, or used as soup base, their role in human survival as important as their role in river ecology. The predator feared in Western imagination becomes, in Amazonian reality, a staple in diet and in story. Perhaps the most telling insight into their ecological role comes during floods when the forest is inundated and prey is abundant. In these seasons, piranhas disperse, their aggression muted, their schools scattered across vast ranges of flooded forest. Here they behave less like marauders and more like generalists, feeding on insects, seeds, and small fish without driving dramatic frenzies. It is only when the system contracts, when drought presses life together into suffocating proximity, that the legend of their violence comes alive. The frenzy is not their default. It is their response to compression, a survival tactic forged in the crucible of scarcity. In this way, the surge and the silence are two halves of their truth. The silence dominates much of the year. Cautious schools drifting among roots, scavenging scraps, trimming fins from the unwary. The surge erupts when conditions demand it, when oxygen and space dwindle, when prey is concentrated and blood is in the water. Both are essential, and together they define the piranha not as monster, but as mediator, a species that shapes behavior and flow as surely as any apex predator. As the dry season stretches on, pools contract further. The water is hot, thick with decay. fish circling with mouths open to gasp oxygen. Into this theatre glide the silver-sided schools, their presence invisible until it is not. A turtle hesitates at the edge. A capybara noses the bank. A wounded fish shivers in the current. In the silence, restraint. In the surge, subtraction. The piranhas are neither villains nor mindless hordes. They are sculptors of behavior, accelerators of decay, enforcers of limits in a system that cannot afford unchecked abundance. The flood will return, and with it, dispersion, relief, and quiet feeding in the submerged forest. Until then, the dry season pools remain their stage, and every ripple carries the possibility that silence will snap into frenzy. For the Amazon, this is balance at its sharpest edge. Teeth as regulators, schools as forces of governance, the river's hidden surgeons working in the shadow between myth and necessity. The river's edge seems empty at first glance. The sandy shallows lie motionless beneath a thin veil of current, a pale margin between the darker depths and the emergent greens of the floodplain. But stillness here is a deception. With a faint flick of a wingtip, grains of sand lift into a soft cloud, spiraling upward before settling again. To the untrained eye, the disturbance vanishes in seconds. To the stingray, it is both concealment and signal, a quiet pulse of presence in a world where invisibility is survival. Freshwater stingrays are phantoms sculpted for this environment, their flattened discs pressed flush to the bottom, a geometry that erases their outline against the substrate. Coloration, a mosaic of spots, rings, or mottled browns, depending on the species, blends seamlessly with river sand and silt. But camouflage is only the surface of their deception. Beneath the skin lies a sensory architecture more extraordinary still. Along the margins of the disc and around the snout, clusters of electroreceptors, minute pits filled with conductive gel, map the faintest electrical signals emitted by living bodies. Every contraction of muscle, every flick of a gill, every twitch of buried prey sends an electrical whisper into the water. For the stingray, these whispers are coordinates. A fish hidden under sand is not invisible. It glows in the electrical landscape, betrayed by its own biology. Foraging is a delicate ballet of dust and suction. Once a target is located, the stingray ripples its fins to excavate a shallow depression, stirring the sediment into a storm that further obscures it from potential predators above. Then, with a sudden flare of spiracles and mouthparts, it generates suction, drawing small fish, crustaceans, or mollusks into its jaws. Flat teeth arranged in pavement-like rows crush shells and grind tough exoskeletons with slow efficiency. Yet the act of feeding is more than consumption. Each excavation aerates the sediment, releasing trapped nutrients and oxygen, resetting the microhabitat for invertebrates and plants. In this way, stingrays are not only predators, but engineers of their environment, turning foraging pits into miniature oases for the benthic community. The stingray's reputation, however, rests less on its feeding than on its tail. Along that slender whip lies one of the Amazon's most feared defenses, a serrated spine sheathed in venomous tissue. Unlike the electric eel's overt discharge or the piranha's coordinated assault, the stingray's weapon is not a tool of predation, but a last resort, triggered when pressure becomes inescapable. The spine is neither thrown nor projected. It must be impaled, driven into the flesh of whatever presses too closely. For otters, caimans, or even jaguars that misjudge an approach, the result is a wound jagged and venom-laced, a lesson often sufficient to prevent a second attempt. This defensive shadow radiates outward into behavior well beyond the stingray itself. Giant otters, despite their confidence, alter their hunting lanes in areas dense with rays, preferring deeper channels where their speed and teamwork face fewer hidden threats. Capybaras crossing shallows avoid sandy bottoms if possible, their herds entering water in tighter groups to reduce the risk of a stray step. Humans too have learned the cost of carelessness. Fishermen tread with deliberate shuffles rather than strides, kicking up sand to alert hidden rays before a foot descends on their spines. Here, the stingray's power is ecological as much as biological. It dictates the choices of others, weaving avoidance into the daily movements of species much larger and more visible than itself. Night alters the terms of the game. As darkness deepens, stingrays rise from their sandy camouflage and glide silently over the bottom, wing-like fins undulating with hypnotic rhythm. Unlike many fish, they are not bound to schooling for safety. Their shielded form and venomous spine grant them a measure of solitude. They patrol hunting grounds with quiet persistence, electroreceptors sweeping like antennae across the unseen grid of muscle signals. Fish resting motionless, frogs suspended in shallows, invertebrates nestled in mud, all become faint sparks in the electrical map. The predator does not chase, it reveals, isolates, and consumes. Seasonality intensifies their role. During the flood pulse, when forests drown and the world becomes a maze of submerged trunks and branches, stingrays disperse into the inundated margins. There, they forage not only on aquatic prey, but also on the invertebrates that colonize drowned leaf litter. Their pits pepper the forest floor, aerating soils that would otherwise stagnate beneath detritus. When waters retreat, they follow the channels back to permanent rivers and lakes, carrying with them the memory of roots, resting places, and spawning grounds. Their mobility helps distribute nutrients across habitats, ensuring that their ecological imprint is not confined to a single arena, but spread across the shifting geography of the floodplain. Predator-prey interactions with stingrays reveal a web of caution and consequence. Juveniles, smaller and less dangerous, fall prey to large catfish and caiman. Adults, however, are rarely eaten. Their spines a deterrent that often outweighs the reward of their flesh. Jaguars may occasionally attempt them, flipping rays from the shallows with practiced paws, but these are calculated risks rather than routine hunts. Most predators learn to keep distance, a respect enforced by generations of painful encounters. This selective predation means stingrays occupy an unusual niche, abundant and influential, yet rarely controlled from above. Their populations self-regulate more through habitat and resource availability than through the jaws of others. Their physiology reflects the balance between vulnerability and dominance. Obligate benthic dwellers. Stingrays rely on spiracles positioned above the eyes to draw water over their gills while buried. This adaptation allows them to remain motionless for hours, concealed beneath sand without suffocating. Yet they are also obligate freshwater species, unique among rays, their kidneys and osmoregulatory systems adapted to balance electrolytes in environments where salt is scarce. Such specialization underscores their evolutionary divergence from marine relatives and ties them irrevocably to the floodplain's rhythms. Their survival is wedded to freshwater cycles, and in turn, they exert influence upon them. Perhaps the most striking aspect of their ecology is the way their danger extends beyond direct encounters. By altering where otters hunt, where capybaras cross, where humans step, stingrays enforce a behavioral geometry on the ecosystem. They create zones of caution, invisible lines where animals hesitate, detour, or cluster. These patterns ripple outward. Herbivore crossings delayed mean vegetation in some areas is grazed less. Seeds dispersed differently. Otters shifting routes change the pressure on fish populations across channels. The stingray's spine, seldom used, nevertheless casts a wide shadow across the decisions of others. In this light, the stingray is less a hidden danger than an unseen architect. Its pits oxygenate mud, its movements redistribute nutrients, its presence redraws the paths of larger species. It rules not through spectacle or abundance, but through subtle pressure, through the possibility of pain, through the invisible map of avoidance it etches into the collective memory of the floodplain. As dawn returns, the sandy shallows regain their stillness. Rays settle back into their camouflage, discs dissolving into the substrate, spines tucked but ready. The river above appears empty, tranquil, a canvas of light and rippling reflections. Yet beneath lies the invisible trap, a presence that shapes not only the prey it consumes but the behavior of the entire community around it. The freshwater stingray is not loud, not visible, not obvious, but it is remembered. And in the memory of fear, in the silence of detours, it exerts a sovereignty as sharp and enduring as any predator in the Amazon. The sun strikes hard against the sandbanks of the Amazon, bleaching them into pale gold as if they were not part of the rainforest at all, but fragments of some hidden desert stitched into the river's fabric. These exposed bars of sediment, sculpted each year by the flood's retreat, are more than idle stretches of beach. They are calendars, synchronizing one of the river's oldest and most enduring rituals, the nesting of the Amazon River turtle. To watch the bank at the height of nesting season is to watch time itself being kept, not in minutes or hours, but in migrations, in generations, in the measured cycles of emergence and return. From the depths of the current, females ascend, hauling their heavy shells onto the hot sand with a slow persistence that belies the urgency of their task. They move in numbers, a parade of carapaces emerging in unison as though some unseen clock has tolled the hour. Their claws scoop shallow chambers, carefully shaped and smoothed, into which dozens of leathery eggs are deposited. Here, under shifting sands, the future of the species is entrusted not to parental care, but to temperature, sunlight, and chance. Like many reptiles, these turtles rely on temperature-dependent sex determination. Warmer nests tend to produce females, cooler nests more males. Thus, the angle of the sun, the depth of the sand, and even the shadow of a nearby log may shape the demographics of a generation. A colony of nests is not just a nursery, it is a statistical experiment written by the elements. The risks are immense. Vultures patrol the skies, waiting for a distracted turtle to leave a nest exposed. Coatis and raccoons sniff along the margins, unearthing clutches before they can incubate. Humans too have long raided nests for eggs, adding another layer of pressure to an already vulnerable strategy. Yet the turtles have evolved their own countermeasure, not through combat or stealth, but through synchrony. When the time for hatching arrives, often cued by seasonal rains or subtle shifts in sand temperature, hundreds or even thousands of hatchlings emerge together in a convulsive wave of life. Predators gorge themselves in the chaos, but their stomachs fill quickly. For every chick swallowed, dozens more scramble past, slipping into the safety of water. This is predator swamping, a survival strategy based not on individual strength, but on overwhelming arithmetic. There are simply more mouths than enemies can consume. Survival is won through abundance and timing, through the sheer volume of life released in a single moment. These synchronized events ripple outward into the ecosystem. Raptors, fish and mammals feed heavily during hatching season, fattening on the sudden bounty. The success of predators is inextricably linked to the success of the turtles. Each hatchling lost is still a contribution to the food web, a redistribution of energy into other lives. Those that survive to adulthood carry another gift for the forest. Unlike many turtles, Podocnemis expansa is a frugivore, consuming fallen fruits from riparian trees and dispersing their seeds downstream. They are gardeners of the river corridor, ferrying genetic material across vast distances as they migrate between feeding grounds and nesting sites. Some seeds are carried dozens of kilometers before being deposited, their passage through the gut scarifying their coats and improving germination. In this way, the turtles' migrations stitch the forest together, maintaining continuity across a landscape fractured by flood and drought. The distances they travel are astonishing. Radio-tagged individuals have been recorded moving hundreds of kilometers along the Amazon and its tributaries, following ancient pathways etched into the river's memory. These migrations are not solitary wanderings but collective pilgrimages, the same routes followed by ancestors centuries before. The nesting beaches become reference points, geographic metronomes around which the cycles of movement align. To the turtles, the river is not a random expanse but a structured system of waypoints, each return to a sandbank reaffirming their role as timekeepers of the floodplain. Beyond the nests and the migrations, the communal nature of their lives is revealed on the basking logs. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of turtles haul themselves out of the water to share in the warmth of the sun. The logs become more than platforms for thermoregulation. They are social stages, nutrient nodes, and ecological crossroads. Droppings fall into the current, enriching the water with nitrogen and phosphorus, feeding algae and small invertebrates that in turn support fish populations. In this way, a basking log is not merely a congregation point, it is a nutrient pump, a hub that redistributes energy from the turtles back into the aquatic web. The forest thrives not just because the turtles disperse seeds, but also because they fertilize the waters that cradle its roots. Thermoregulation itself shapes their daily lives. Cold-blooded, they must balance time in the sun with time in water to maintain optimal body function. Basking accelerates digestion, improves immune response, and fuels growth, but it carries risks, exposure to predators, dehydration, and human hunters. The communal aspect of basking offers some protection. Many eyes scan the banks, many bodies shift at the first sign of danger, and the splash of 100 shells returning to water is enough to deter most would-be attackers. As with their nesting strategy, survival is not individual but collective, an expression of safety in numbers refined by generations. These turtles are not apex predators nor stealthy ambushers. They do not sculpt prey populations with sudden violence or dictate the movements of rivals through intimidation. Their role is quieter, but no less foundational. They are engineers of time and space, their nesting beaches structuring the seasonal calendar, their migrations connecting distant habitats, their basking logs enriching the river with nutrients, and their frugivory reshaping the very forest that shades the banks. In their long lives, some individuals surviving decades, they become living archives of the river's rhythms, embodying both continuity and change. Yet this role as timekeeper is under threat. Dams interrupt migrations, altering currents and flooding patterns that have guided them for millennia. Egg harvesting, once sustainable under traditional practices, becomes devastating when industrialized. Climate change threatens to skew the delicate balance of sex ratios determined by sand temperature, raising the spectre of generations disproportionately female. The collapse of turtle populations would echo widely. Fewer seeds dispersed, fewer nutrients cycled, fewer synchronized hatchling floods to feed predators. The loss of the timekeeper would unravel more than a species. It would loosen the cadence of the floodplain itself. As the floodwaters rise once more, erasing the sandbanks in a slow reclaiming, the turtles disappear into the vast dispersal of the river. They will feed in flooded forests, scatter across tributaries, vanish into the expanse. But the sandbanks will return, and so will they, arriving with the precision of a pendulum swinging back to center. In this return lies the secret of their power. By moving not in isolation but in synchrony with each other, with the seasons and with the river's cycles, the Amazon river turtles remind us that survival is not only about immediate success, but about the endurance of pattern across time. The sun sets on the sandbank, its glow fading into shadow as the first night birds call. Beneath the sand, thousands of eggs rest in silence, their fates written by temperature and chance. In weeks they will erupt together, a living flood of hatchlings racing toward the water. Some will be taken, many will perish, but enough will survive to return decades from now, drawn back to the same stretch of sand to keep time once again for the river. In their persistence lies the measure of the Amazon itself, cycles of abundance and loss, of risk and renewal, of endings that are always beginnings. The morning light finds the riverbank already alive with movement. The grass, damp with night mist, bends beneath the slow advance of a herd of capybaras, the world's largest rodents. Their bodies, rounded, chestnut-colored, low-slung, seem almost inconspicuous against the landscape. Yet their influence is anything but small. As they clip the grasses at the water's edge with methodical bites, a quiet transformation unfolds, one that ripples far beyond their own survival. To watch them is to watch a pulse moving through the floodplain, a rhythm of feeding, resting and moving that governs not only the plants beneath their teeth, but the predators that wait in ambush and the very structure of the river's margins. The feeding itself is deceptively simple. Capybaras are obligate grazers, specialists in grasses and aquatic plants that many other herbivores bypass. Their teeth, continuously growing, shear vegetation in neat, cropped swaths, leaving behind lawns of trimmed greenery. Yet, unlike cattle, their grazing does not strip an area bare. They move in cycles, returning repeatedly to familiar routes that they reopen each morning and evening. This creates a mosaic, patches of closely cropped grass alternating with untouched growth, areas of fertilization interspersed with areas of recovery. The effect resembles careful land management, but it is born entirely from their own routines, encoded in a social structure that moves them as a unit rather than as scattered individuals. Dung is as much a tool as teeth in this ecological engineering. Capybaras deposit it constantly, often communally, in latrine-like sites near feeding grounds. These deposits return nitrogen and phosphorus directly into the soil, enriching the grasses they themselves consume. Fertilization accelerates regrowth, ensuring that cropped patches recover swiftly, remaining attractive for future grazing. In this way, the capybara acts as both consumer and gardener, shaping plant distribution and productivity not through intention, but through the unbroken cycle of digestion and defecation. Riverbanks where capybaras persist year after year are often richer in biomass, their grasses lusher, their soils more stabilized against erosion. But the open visibility of this grazing comes at a price. For every bite taken, eyes and ears remain alert to ambush. Jaguars stalk from the undergrowth, their rosetted coats vanishing into dappled shadow. Anacondas lie submerged in adjacent pools, coils waiting for the wrong step. These predators time their attacks to the rhythms of the herd. Jaguars learn the routes where capybaras most often emerge from the water, returning again and again to favored bends in the river. Anacondas wait where trails narrow, where bank and water meet in tight embrace. To the predators, the herd's predictability is a calendar of opportunity. Yet predation does not doom the capybara, it shapes it. When attacks intensify, grazing patterns shift. Entire herds may abandon favored banks for weeks, even months, allowing vegetation to rebound unchecked. When pressure eases, they return, their clipping teeth reopening the corridor. Thus, jaguars and anacondas inadvertently create cycles of disturbance and recovery in the floodplain's plant communities. Predators, in taking their share, extend the capybara's influence by ensuring that no one stretch of bank is grazed continuously. The ecosystem's mosaic of vegetation owes as much to fear as to feeding. Sociality is the capybara's countermeasure to this pressure. Herds often number a dozen or more, led by dominant males but held together by kinship and cooperation. Vigilance is communal. While some graze, others lift their blunt heads, nostrils flaring, ears twitching to the faintest rustle. Alarm calls, sharp, barking notes, can send the entire group bounding for the water, where safety lies. Water is both refuge and road for them. They are capable swimmers, their bodies buoyant, their nostrils sealing against the surface as they slip away from threat. In rivers, they can remain submerged for minutes, surfacing only to breathe before disappearing again. The floodplain's endless merging of land and water is their shield, allowing escape where open plains would have spelled certain death. But this dependence on water also ties their lives to the hydrological pulse of the Amazon. In flood season, when the river expands into the forest, capybaras disperse into new feeding grounds, grazing on fresh shoots along the inundated edges. In the dry season, as waters retreat, they contract toward permanent lakes and rivers, their herds growing denser, their grazing pressure intensifying. This seasonal oscillation redistributes their influence, ensuring that no single patch of vegetation endures their teeth year-round. Their migrations, though modest compared to birds or turtles, ripple through the ecosystem like tides of herbivory. Their physiology reveals further nuances in this grazing life. Hindgut fermenters, capybaras, digest plant matter through microbial fermentation in their enlarged cecum, extracting energy from fibrous grasses that would otherwise be nutritionally barren. They also practice coprophagy, re-ingesting their own dung to recover additional nutrients, particularly proteins and vitamins synthesized by gut microbes. In this way, every blade of grass is passed twice through their system, wringing maximum energy from minimal resources. This recycling makes them efficient players in the nutrient economy, converting low-quality forage into biomass and fertilizer at rates that sustain both their herds and the plant communities they maintain. Beyond the visible impacts on vegetation, their very presence fosters secondary effects. Birds forage on insects flushed by the grazing herds. Soil compaction from their trails creates microhabitats for certain plants adapted to disturbance. Their dung supports insect larvae, which in turn feed fish when floods reclaim the banks. In the intricate web of the Amazon, the capybara is a hub of connections, not merely consuming but redistributing, not merely surviving but engineering. Still, their abundance is not guaranteed. Human hunters prize them for meat and hides, and in regions where predator populations have declined, capybaras may overgraze banks, collapsing the very mosaics they once maintained. Without jaguars and anacondas to modulate their grazing routes, vegetation can be stripped continuously, leading to erosion, loss of cover for nesting birds, and destabilized soils. Thus, the balance they create is contingent on the presence of their enemies. Prey and predator together weave the pattern, remove one thread, and the tapestry unravels. As dusk approaches, the herd retreats toward the water, their bodies dark silhouettes against the fading glow. Some slip into the shallows, eyes just above the surface, while others linger at the margin, chewing slowly, ears flicking at the night insects. The air is thick with humidity, the forest alive with the calls of frogs and cicadas. In this moment, the capybara's influence is both invisible and immense. The grass they clipped will regrow greener, the soil enriched by their dung. Jaguars, silent in the tree line, will factor their roots into tomorrow's hunt. The riverbank itself, shaped by the rhythm of their grazing and absence, will bear their signature for seasons to come. To call the capybara merely prey is to miss the depth of its role. It is an engineer of plant mosaics, a distributor of nutrients, a pulse of life whose timing feeds predators and sustains vegetation alike. Its influence is not carved in teeth and claws, but in cycles of return, in the patient clipping of grass, in the constant fertilization of soil. In the Amazon floodplain, balance is not kept only by the hunters. Sometimes it is maintained by the grazers, whose steady communal presence turns consumption into creation and vulnerability into design. The forest after midnight hums with a different register of life. Rain falls in fine, steady sheets, beading on leaves and pooling along branches until it trickles downward in countless rivulets. The chorus of frogs, once scattered, swells into overlapping layers of sound, chirps, trills, and pulses that echo through the dripping canopy. It is here, along narrow streams that carve the slope in silver ribbons, that one of the rainforest's most delicate yet consequential actors takes the stage. Suspended on leaves overhanging the water, a clutch of glass frog eggs clings in a translucent mass, each embryo visible, their tiny hearts pulsing beneath a skin so clear it seems made of rain itself. The adults that guard them are scarcely more solid. Glass frogs, named for their transparency, are creatures that embody the liminal, neither fully present nor fully hidden. Their pale green backs blend with the sheen of leaves, while their undersides reveal organs and bones as though anatomy were meant to be seen rather than concealed. Transparency here is not absence but strategy. By reducing their outlines, they erase the silhouette predators rely on, becoming instead a suggestion of leaf, vein, or water droplet. It is an invisibility woven not of shadow, but of light refracted and passed through. Yet the males, in particular, cannot rely on transparency alone. They take up stations beside egg clutches, their bodies pressed against leaves as rain gathers around them. Their task is both sentinel and soldier, to remain with the clutch through the long hours of incubation, guarding against wasps, flies, and rival males who may attempt to dislodge the embryos. Intruders are not tolerated. With sharp kicks of their hind legs, guardians strike at threats, hurling them from the clutch before they can puncture eggs with ovipositors or consume developing tadpoles whole. In these moments, the glass frog's frailty vanishes, replaced by fierce determination that belies its size. Protection of future generations is not optional. It is the center of their evolutionary design. When hatching time arrives, the miracle doubles. Tadpoles slip from their gelatinous cases and drop into the streams below. Gravity, rain, and the timing of life align to deliver them into running water, where they begin their aquatic existence. But this descent carries more than new generations. Nutrients bound within the eggs are transferred downslope, feeding aquatic systems that flow into larger rivers. Each clutch is a micro-pulse of energy, a link in the transfer of resources from canopy to stream, from land to water. The rainforest's complexity is often described in terms of trees and mammals, but here in the glass frog is revealed another truth, that tiny, fragile bodies serve as bridges of energy between realms. The very sensitivity that defines their lives elevates them to a role larger than their size suggests. Glass frogs are acutely tied to humidity and water quality. Their skin, permeable and delicate, demands constant contact with moisture to prevent desiccation. Streams must remain cool, clear, and oxygen-rich for eggs to survive and tadpoles to thrive. Pollution, siltation, or chemical intrusion disrupts this fragile balance almost instantly. A clutch of eggs, clouding and collapsing after heavy agricultural runoff, is not merely a loss for one generation, it is an alarm bell for the health of the entire watershed. In this way, glass frogs function as living sensors, their presence or absence signaling whether the rainforest's edges still hold integrity. It is fitting, then, that they inhabit thresholds, leaves overhanging streams, branches at the margins of waterfalls, narrow bands of habitat where land and water are in constant dialogue. Their lives are defined by edges, between concealment and visibility, between survival and collapse, between forest slope and stream corridor. As threshold guardians, they mediate flows of energy and information, revealing when those flows falter. To see them vanish from a stream is to understand that the system itself is under stress, long before larger animals show signs of decline. Predation remains a constant force shaping their behavior. Snakes hunt the eggs clinging to branches in the dark, probing the clusters with flickering tongues. Insects, small but deadly, target embryos with precision. Even bats may pluck adults from their perches. To survive against such a gauntlet requires both resilience and timing. Many species of glass frog synchronize their calling and breeding with heavy rains, when predator detection is more difficult and streams swell to carry tadpoles quickly away from danger. The rain does not merely provide water, it provides cover, a curtain that conceals their vulnerability long enough for the next cycle to begin. But transparency itself is also a product of ecological negotiation. By reducing their visibility, glass frogs become less attractive targets not only to visual predators but also to human collectors. Their fragility, however, has not spared them from the pressures of deforestation and habitat alteration. Roads carved into slopes fragment their corridors. Mining and agriculture cloud the clear streams they require. Where once dozens of species were recorded in a single watershed, now silence falls over some valleys, the calls absent, the leaves empty. In losing the frogs, the system loses not just beauty, but its early warning system. The role of the male in guarding clutches underscores the evolutionary trade-offs at work. Few amphibians provide such direct parental care, and fewer still invest so heavily in defense. The cost is high. Males expend energy, risk predation, and often forego further mating opportunities while stationed at a clutch. Yet the payoff is measurable in survival rates. Clutches guarded by attentive males yield far higher numbers of successful hatchlings than those left unguarded. In the equation of reproduction, defense is as valuable as fertility, a truth that shapes the very structure of their populations. In ecological terms, the glass frog's contribution to nutrient cycling and predator-prey dynamics extends further than often acknowledged. Streams that support their populations also tend to support richer assemblages of aquatic invertebrates and fish, nourished by the steady rain of tadpoles and organic matter. This in turn feeds larger predators, from kingfishers to river dolphins downstream. The fragile jelly of a single clutch thus threads into the diets of animals far removed, a subtle but critical contribution to the continuum of life flowing through the basin. Seen in this light, glass frogs embody the paradox of the Amazon: fragility as strength, invisibility as influence, silence as signal. They remind us that ecosystems are not sustained only by the spectacular, the jaguar's roar, the anaconda's coils, the caiman's jaws, but also by the delicate, the nearly invisible. They are guardians not through dominance, but through sensitivity, their transparency both camouflage and message. Where they remain, the system still breathes. Where they vanish, the threshold itself has failed. As dawn begins to creep into the canopy, the rain slackens and mist rises from the forest floor. The stream below murmurs, swollen from the night's downpour. On a leaf above its edge, a male glass frog clings beside his clutch, body glowing faintly in the dim light, skin so thin that his own heartbeat is visible. Around him, the forest stirs, but he does not move. For now, his vigil continues, as it has for countless generations, guarding the boundary between forest and water, life and death, presence and absence. The time will come when the tadpoles drop, when his watch ends, but until then, the threshold holds, fragile, transparent, and essential.